Well, thank you, Alan and ACCAN, for the invitation. I'm delighted also to be here, and I say that very genuinely because the relationship between the regulator and the ACMA in particular and consumers can be fluctuating, and it's never as effective as it should or could be. And I read the opening comments to the invitation, and I'll tell you my reaction to them, but just to remind you what those words were, they said consumer groups have long expressed frustrations with communications regulation, a lack of timeliness, apparent preference for light touch or no regulation, unclear parameters about what kind of proof is required to invoke policy change or regulatory intervention, enforcement approaches and priorities, and the extent to which policy decisions genuinely incorporate consumer perspectives. At the same time, regulators and policymakers complain that consumers are demanding action of them based on mere anecdotal evidence or in circumstances where there is no clear evidence of a market problem or solution. And when I read that, I wrote bingo, because there's a strong germ of truth in both observations. So I was genuinely looking forward to joining this afternoon, and Alan, thank you for the initiative, and I do mean that. I'm also joined this afternoon by the ACMA's acting deputy chair, Chris Chia, many of whom you would know, and Chris is, as importantly in this context, the chair of our CCF, our Consultative Consumer Forum, our executive manager for the content material, Kath Saleri, and a number of the staff of the ACMA. So we thought we would support this in a very material way, apart from the additional cash contribution on top of your $2 million. But I wouldn't want to think, I wouldn't want there to be any suggestion that in any way this was cash for comment. So look, that's by way of my opening remarks. Alan said that the ACCAN's a new organisation, and quite clearly it is. And in my view, the ACMA is a new organisation. Yes, we've been around since July 2005, but maybe later I can share with you a far more guttural version of life since July 2005, and it's only in, I think, only in calendar 2008 and 2009 that this organisation has grown into a greater understanding of its role with greater confidence, and thanks to Avel and those in the department, increasingly fit for purpose regulatory toolkit. So yes, we've been around since July 2005, but I still think we're a young organisation, and that's my cue because 2 weeks ago I wrote to our key stakeholders about the upcoming restructure of the ACMA, which is going to be effective on the 1st of December. It isn't particularly public, but I have written to our stakeholders, and I know that there's a shortened version of this on the web. But this restructure is designed to bring additional focus to several key tasks that presently face us while maintaining our commitment to regulating converging industries in a converged way. One of the 4 primary drivers for the restructure, and this is a restructure of our volition on our terms, and it's always good to be ahead of the curve, and one of the 4 primary drivers consistent with recent federal government initiatives is an appropriate new weighting to the role of the citizen. I want to state right away that this doesn't in any way imply any lessening of our commitment to the protection of consumers. And later we might have a discussion between the difference between citizen and consumer, but it does bring the human dimension to a wider consideration of the public interest in areas such as content classification, cyber safety, and emergency services. With this in mind, one of our 6 new divisions, we had 5, we're moving to 6, is the Content, Consumer and Citizen Division, and it will take as its theme the interests of individuals as citizens, as consumers, and as audiences for content. This division will bring into one place the ACMA's investigation and compliance work relating to the spam, do not call register, broadcasting codes of practice, the telecommunications consumer protection codes, and internet content rules. Another of our new divisions, the Digital Economy Division, will be fundamentally orientated towards the impact of convergence and related changes in the policy environment. It will have responsibility for the mobile premium services regulatory package introduced this year, as well as such issues as e-security, cyber safety, and access to services. As this list begins to demonstrate, the ACMA has a very broad range of responsibilities which have as their focus consumers and citizens, some delivered through direct regulation, some through co-regulatory arrangements. At a conceptual level, the ACMA's consumer responsibilities could be categorised as delivering the following 5. Opportunity and access, ensuring that all Australians, wherever they live or work, have access to a phone service. Performance and quality of phone services through our monitoring work. Thirdly, facilitating and monitoring diversity and choice for consumers. Fourthly, consumer safeguards, compelling compliance with the Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman Scheme and consumer codes, and particularly from your perspective, evidencing to you meaningful redress. And finally, consumer control and consent through the Do Not Call provisions and, of course, our very successful work, particularly in the last 18 months, in combating spam, and a particularly satisfying result in the federal court last Friday week. The ACMA's role and compliance tools differ across each of these areas. In the co-regulatory regimes, there's a graduated use of regulatory measures using the minimum power intervention necessary to achieve the desired result, which is obviously compliance with the relevant provision on a sustained basis, usually from having encouraged, hopefully, behavioural change. On the other hand, some statutes we administer, and I cite the Spam Act and the Do Not Call Register Act, which set out in legislation a more direct regulatory role, provide us with a well-graduated and therefore effective range of enforcement options for the ACMA, including financial penalties. But here's the crucial rider. It's important that where the behaviour of market participants or the shape of market structures is inimical to the softer options of co-regulatory control, the regulator should and must take recourse to harder regulatory actions involving directions, enforcement and prosecution as deemed required, recognising, of course, the resources that each step further into the direct regulatory action requires.